I'm John Willerton. I'm a professor of political science in the School of Government and Public Policy at the University of Arizona in the United States. I think the most important thing for people who do not live in Russia to understand about Vladimir Putin is that he comes from the lower middle class. He has, I think, a style and values and a view that very much reflect average Russians. Sometimes we get the views that come from the intellectuals, from the highly educated, and often people that perhaps have the big international connections. But for average Russians, people of the middle class, people of the working class, I think they find his style, his worldview very much like their own. I think Russia is becoming more important in the international system. It does not have the leadership role that it did at in the period of the Soviet Union, the Cold War, and the 1990s were a very bad time for Russia domestically and in terms of the contraction of their power. But over the last 15, 17 years, their economy has improved dramatically. Their political importance in the world has grown. Their military capability has grown. And I would say their economic importance reaching outside of the country has increased. So I see them certainly as an important regional power, but they are a country that matters globally. I think the holding of the World Cup was extremely important to Russians. It was very important to Russians a number of years ago when, as president, Vladimir Putin was able to successfully win for Russia the Winter Olympics that were held in 2014 in Sochi, and then the World Cup held in Russia in June, July of 2018. I think for Russians, there's a great sense of self-respect. What a surprise that their team actually did well for a while. No one expected this. Russians didn't expect it. But I think for them what was important was simply that the world community recognized they were capable of holding very good games. And by all accounts, they were very successful games. And for this, Russians feel a great sense of pride and self-respect. Well, the relationship between Russia and the United States is not good. It has been deteriorating for some time. And we seem to have reached some new lows the last 6 months or year. There is a great debate in the United States about the nature of the relationship, what we should have. There is great mistrust of Vladimir Putin as a leader. There's a great uncertainty what is motivating Russia, but much of the thinking is negative. In this regard, President Donald Trump does have an alternative view, but it is not held by very many, including it is not held by members of his Republican Party. Is this relationship important to the world? I think absolutely, because even if Russia's economy is not one of the biggest, on the other hand, Russia is the other great military superpower. And Vladimir Putin has proven to be a very effective leader, diplomat internationally. Good working relations with China, more relations with developing countries. And in that regard, I think we have to take seriously not only Russia's role in the world, but the nature of the relationship between the United States and Russia. So I think it is important. We are very concerned about Russia's influence outside of itself. If you look at many of the trouble spots now in the world between the United States and Russia, between the West and Russia, they are areas that historically, traditionally fell in the Russian zone of influence. Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. Georgia was a part of the Soviet Union. Syria was a great ally of Russia, Soviet times, post-Soviet, in the Middle East. And so in that regard, the United States and many of our Western friends are very concerned about Russia's activities, their interest there. Now, what of course is difficult is the Russian view is this is their sphere of influence. This is their sphere of influence. They are not becoming active in Latin America. They are not becoming active in Africa. Where they're active is in the areas where they've traditionally had an important influence. I think in Russia, the great respect for Putin by most people has had to do with both the improvement of the economy and the return of Russian international standing, and also a sense of Russian self-respect. Russia's self-respect. This is very important to the Russians. So we already discussed the coming of the Olympics, the coming of the World Cup. These are important to Russians. At the same time, I have to add, over the last 6 weeks, Vladimir Putin's public approval rating has dropped dramatically. It's moved from about 85% down to about 55% because the Russian government has called for a raising of the retirement age. And this is upsetting many Russians, that now women will retire at age 60, men will retire at age 65. And Russians are very worried about this, and they are not happy. And they're saying, for instance, why didn't Vladimir Putin discuss this when he was in the campaign? Why didn't he talk about this when he was running for re-election? So he still enjoys public approval, but it's 55%, not 85%.